She came with that fake smile again, pointing at the wooden gate like it belonged to her. "This fence is illegal. We warned you," she shouted, waving a paper that looked more like it was printed at home than from any office. Before I could even ask who gave her the right, two men in bright vests dragged out a chainsaw and fired it up. The sound roared through the neighborhood, and within seconds, our gate splintered into pieces. My mom screamed, my little brother cried, and Karen folded her arms as if she had just passed some law. She didn't expect what came next, though, because Grandpa was already sitting on the porch, rocking slowly in his chair with his old 12-gauge resting across his lap. He didn't move, didn't say a word, just tapped his boot on the floor, watching them like a hawk. Karen tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. You can't threaten us," she said, but her eyes never left that shotgun. And that's when Grandpa leaned forward and finally spoke, calm and steady. "This is my land. Touch one more board and you'll regret it."
Karen's fake confidence slipped for a moment, but she snapped her fingers at the men with the chainsaw. "Don't stop! Keep cutting!" she barked, her voice shaking. The workers hesitated, glancing at Grandpa, who hadn't moved an inch. The barrel of his shotgun wasn't raised, but the way he stared at them was louder than any threat. One man muttered, "Ma'am, this doesn't feel right. We're not law enforcement." Karen hissed back, "You're being paid, so do your job." That's when Grandpa slowly stood up from his chair, his boots crunching against the wooden porch. The creak of the old boards echoed in the tense air. He didn't point the gun. He didn't need to. He just looked straight at Karen and said, "You think you run this street, but you've never once checked the county records." She blinked, confused, then forced a laugh. "You're bluffing. HOA owns this land." But I noticed Grandpa had slipped something out of his pocket, a folded document, old but official-looking, with county stamps across the top. He tossed it down at her feet, and even before she bent to pick it up, I could see the red seal. Karen's smirk faltered as her eyes skimmed the words. Grandpa crossed his arms and said quietly, "You're standing on my property line, and right now, you're trespassing."
Karen's face turned red, but instead of backing down, she pulled out her phone and started dialing. "Fine, if you won't listen, the cops'll deal with you," she snapped, pacing like she was the one in control. My mom whispered, "Dad, maybe we should just go inside." But Grandpa lifted his hand, stopping her. His eyes never left Karen. Within minutes, a black SUV rolled up. No sirens, no police markings. Two bulky men stepped out wearing tactical vests that said HOA Security. They walked like they owned the place, one cracking his knuckles, while the other rested a hand on what looked way too much like a gun under his jacket. "Sir, put the weapon down," the taller one ordered, nodding at Grandpa's shotgun. Karen smirked, standing behind them like a queen with her soldiers. Grandpa didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned the shotgun gently against the porch railing like he had nothing to hide. Then he said calmly, "If you're real law enforcement, you won't mind showing your badges." The men exchanged a look, their silence stretching longer than it should have. Karen barked, "They don't need to prove anything. They're here under HOA authority." That's when Grandpa chuckled, low and steady. "Wrong answer," he said, and before anyone could blink, another truck pulled up the driveway, this one with real flashing lights.
The HOA Security froze as the sheriff's truck came to a stop, red and blue lights washing over the broken fence. Karen's grin vanished in an instant. The real deputy stepped out, hand resting on his holster, his voice sharp. "What's going on here?" Karen ran toward him like she had already won. "Officer, arrest this man! He's threatening us with a gun! He destroyed HOA property and refuses to comply!" She pointed at Grandpa, her voice high and desperate. The deputy's eyes narrowed, then shifted to the splintered wood of our fence, the still humming chainsaw, and the two bulky men in fake vests. He raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, that's not HOA property. That's private land."
He glanced at Grandpa, who silently handed him the folded document. The deputy read it, nodded once, and then looked back at Karen. According to county records, this entire strip, including the road you're standing on, belongs to him. Karen stuttered. That can't be true. HOA runs this neighborhood. The deputy tilted his head. Ma'am, there isn't even a registered HOA in this county. The color drained from her face as the deputy turned to the so-called security. And you two, unless you can produce law enforcement credentials, you're under arrest for impersonation. The men panicked, one trying to slip back toward the SUV. The deputy's hand shot to his weapon. Don't even think about it. And right there, for the first time, Karen realized her little kingdom had just crumbled in front of everyone.
The deputy cuffed the two fake officers while Karen kept shouting, her voice cracking. You don't understand. I run this neighborhood. He can't just sit there with a shotgun. But no one was listening anymore. Neighbors had gathered along the sidewalks, phones raised, recording every second. Some whispered, some laughed quietly. For years, Karen had bullied them all. Finally, they were watching her fall. Grandpa picked up his shotgun, holding it loosely by his side, and looked straight at her. You brought men with guns onto my porch, in front of my family. You should be glad I called the sheriff instead of handling it my way. His words were calm, but the weight of them made Karen take a step back. The deputy sighed, clearly tired of her screaming. Ma'am, you just ordered men with weapons to destroy private property. You can either leave right now, or I can take you in for trespassing and criminal damage. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked around at the broken gate, the neighbors recording, the men being shoved into the patrol truck, and she knew she was trapped. Still, instead of apologizing, she hissed, This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me. Grandpa just smirked and leaned back into his chair, resting the shotgun across his lap again. Grandpa, I've fought in wars. Do you really think I'm scared of an HOA? The crowd burst into laughter, and for the first time, Karen had no comeback.
Karen's threats didn't stop there. The very next morning, a tow truck rolled up in front of her driveway, hooking onto Grandpa's old Ford. My mom rushed outside, yelling, "That's our truck! You can't take it!" The driver shrugged and said, "HOA order." But when Grandpa walked out with his coffee mug in one hand, the driver froze. "Unhook it," Grandpa said calmly. The man stammered, Sorry, sir, but I got paperwork here." He held up a clipboard. Grandpa snatched it, scanned the page, then held it up for everyone to see. The so-called order was just a printed sheet with HOA's fake letterhead, signed by none other than Karen. Neighbors gasped, pulling out their phones again. Grandpa tore the paper in half, letting it fall to the ground. "This is fraud," he said, his voice cutting through the morning air. "And I've already spoken to the county attorney. Next time you show up here, you won't be driving away." The tow driver, realizing he'd been set up, unhooked the truck in a hurry and peeled out of the driveway. Just then, Karen appeared at the end of the street, arms crossed, smirking like she'd want something. But when she noticed the sheriff's cruiser turning the corner toward her again, her smile vanished. Grandpa raised his mug toward her like a toast and said loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "Keep pushing, Karen. You're only digging your own grave." And for the first time, Karen looked scared. By evening, the whole street was buzzing. Neighbors who once stayed quiet were now knocking on our door, thanking Grandpa for standing up to Karen. One even whispered, "She fined me for having a flag in my yard, said it wasn't aesthetic." Another said, "She threatened to evict us, but we rent from the county, not her." Piece by piece, the truth spilled out. Karen had been running a fake HOA scam for years, bullying families and pocketing money. Grandpa listened, silent at first, but then finally said, "If she's been stealing from you, then it's time the law sees it." He opened his old lockbox, pulled out a folder thick with documents, letters Karen had left on our door, fee notices, and photos he had been collecting. "I knew she'd slip up," he muttered.
That night, when the sheriff returned, Grandpa handed him the entire file. The deputy's eyes widened as he flipped through page after page. This is enough for a full investigation. Karen, watching from across the street, realized too late what was happening. She ran toward us, screaming, "You can't do this! You don't know who you're messing with!" Grandpa stepped off the porch for the first time all day, his shadow long under the streetlight. He stopped right in front of her and said, steady as stone, "I know exactly who I'm messing with. A fraud. And tomorrow morning, the county's gonna know too." Karen's face went pale. For the first time, she didn't yell back. She just stood there trembling.
The next morning was different. Quiet. Heavy. Like the street itself was holding its breath. Around 9 a.m., 3 county cruisers and an unmarked black sedan rolled up. Real investigators stepped out, clipboards in hand, badges flashing. Neighbors spilled onto their lawns to watch. Karen came storming out of her house in a robe, hair wild, yelling, "You have no right! This is my neighborhood!" But the investigators didn't even look at her. One deputy read out loud, "Karen Miller, you're under arrest for fraud, impersonation, and theft." The neighbors gasped. Some even clapped. She screamed and kicked, but the cuffs clicked shut. As they walked her to the car, Grandpa sat calmly on his porch again, shotgun resting across his knees like always. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just tipped his hat when her eyes locked on him. "Told you this was my land," he said, voice steady. The sheriff turned to the crowd and added, "For the record, there is no HOA in this neighborhood. You're all free of her." Cheers broke out, neighbors hugging each other, some even tearing up. Years of fear had ended in one morning. Mom whispered, "Dad, you saved everyone." Grandpa shook his head. "No, I just protected what's mine. That's what you do, for family, for your land, for your country." And as the cruisers rolled away with Karen screaming inside, Grandpa leaned back in his chair, watching the sunrise over the broken gate. Fence can be rebuilt, but freedom? That you never let anyone take. The street was quiet again, except now it finally felt like home.